how can you differentiate? How could we stand out among the competition, among the hospitals that had the big dollars?
Well, hey, Dr. Castro, welcome to the show. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing wonderful. I'm looking forward to sitting and talking with you about patient experience and using that to build your business and then maybe even some technology. But before we do that, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and then what got you into doing what you're doing now?
So, my name is Dr. Harvey Castro. I'm a board certified ER physician. But I feel like it's hard to describe what I do or what my past because I've done a little bit of everything. I've done things as far as I created my own vitamin company. At one point, I had over 30 iPhone apps and a consultant for medical apps. Later, I decided I was going to have my own business and created my own, I call it my own mini healthcare, where I had my own billing company, stamping company, and emergency rooms. And then the latest, I'm also an author. I wrote a book recently called ChatGPT in Healthcare or and Healthcare.
Yeah, and we connected because we were talking about building those ERs, and you ended up building what? You had 9 of them all together, and then you sold them, right?
Yeah, so I had honestly, I've built over 20, but I put 7 under one brand.
Yeah,
So I did it for other people, and when I realized, hey, I understand this business well, let me do my own name and my own business per se. So that was good.
yeah. And what specifically kind of drove you into doing that because I mean, as a doctor, you could do a lot of things, right? You could have your own private practice. You could, be a consultant for, medical expert stuff. So what drove you specifically into like, I want to do standalone ER rooms?
You know, looking back, I think I've always wanted to do things outside the box. I've always wanted to not go with the norm. When I was working in the hospital system, to answer your question, I was not happy. I signed up to be a doctor, but when I was in the ER, I quickly realized that they were pushing me to see patients faster than I really wanted to. Not that I was slow in any way; I was average with the other docs, but they were really on me about seeing if I could increase my productivity, and that would be by patients and encounters. And I just thought, man, I'm a doctor first, and now you're pushing me like a number for others, and I just couldn't swallow that pill. And so the freestanding market, ironically, I live in Dallas, Texas. One of the first freestandings in the world was built literally in my neighborhood, and I saw that company rise, and I think they ended up with like 60 or 70 ERs around the
Oh,
United
wow.
States. And then I decided, you know what? I'm gonna quit. I'm gonna quit ER. And I remember I was actually one of the owners of the ER company, and the company at the people at the top are like, Harvey, you're crazy. Do you realize there's only like a handful of us, and we're getting paid well, and you're willing to give this up? And I was like, yeah, it's not worth it. I would come home so tired. I remember the breaking point was me seeing about 90 patients in 12 hours by
Oh, holy
myself.
smokes.
And after that, I was like, I can't do this. I can't be like in my 50s later or 60s and do this. There's no way. So, luckily for me, I decided to start a free standalone ER.
Yeah. And then what were the biggest kind of challenges or lessons you learned starting that? Because I'm sure going from, a lot of people do this, right? Especially clinicians or technical experts, right? Like we have this craft, if you would, we have this expertise and we're like, I can do this for myself. And we go out into business and we learn all kinds of stuff. Like there's a whole back end that's getting done without us, or the marketing and sales engine or managing people and all of that. So moving from okay, you were working in a hospital or in an ER, and then you're starting your own practice. Kind of what was the biggest lesson you learned doing that, like kind of bootstrapping this thing and building it from the ground up?
You know, I think I'm probably naive in the sense that I'm always optimistic about everything,
Oh yeah.
and that being naive sometimes was an advantage because I didn't realize some of the things I was going into. With that said, one of the things I could give others as an advice is you can't stay stagnant. How I practiced medicine when I was a medical student does not reflect residency, and then that does not reflect my first few years, and then that does not reflect who I am today. So My number one advice is you have to be able to move and change. You have to accept change. Most people hate change and will stay in bad relationships, will do things that don't make sense because just do not want to change. So, my number one advice is going into the business, be able to pivot. If you're not able to pivot, you're going to fail. And so,
Yeah.
going into that business, even when I first started to what it became later, it was so different because we had to pivot.
Yeah. Cool deal. And so you ended up growing these things, like you said, you built 20, but seven were under one brand. How did part of the reason for your move, right, was because you wanted to offer a higher level of care and customer or patient experience and engagement was very important. So how did that piece, the whole patient service, patient experience, patient engagement play a role, one in the success of the business, but then just in kind of building it and the culture that you put together at these standalone ERs?
Well, you hit it right there. The magic word in all these things is culture. You can go into any business and they can like, well, let's just use healthcare. You can go to any ER in the United States and it's a certain type of care. How can you differentiate? How could we stand out among the competition, among the hospitals that had the big dollars? And so one of the things we did is we turned everything over towards the patient. We said, you know what? It's not about the doctor, it's not about the ER, it's about the patient. And I know that sounds cliche-ish and everybody says that, but let me give you a true example. Um, we changed the culture so that we educated everyone from the front door to the back, every person that dealt with the patient to be keep that in mind that the patient was first. And I think the best example was this was not in our protocols. This isn't something we did, but one of the radiology techs decided to do this. And this is a quick story. Patient came in. It was a child, broke his ankle. The triage at the time was the radiology tech. Took him straight to the X-ray, called the doctor, called the nurse. Everybody gathered at the X-ray while the patient was at the X-ray. Got the medication for pain meds. Got the X-ray. Obviously, it was broken. Splinted the patient. Did the consult there. Talked to the specialist. Had the appointment, and then the parents. By the time they went home, everything was on one in one place instead of telling the story in the front office and then the ER and then the
Yeah.
radiology tech. It was one time, and that was the culture that was built. And so that's why people just love coming to us because they knew we were going to do whatever it took to make it right.
Yeah. And what specifically, because I'm obviously you're getting clinicians, unless you're getting them fresh out of school or something like that, where they might still be like have this ideal of healthcare. Odds are you're picking people up who have worked in other clinics or work in other hospitals and they're used to kind of this industrial kind of fee for service model of healthcare, like you said, where there's a lot of productivity and a lot of just drive for operational efficiency. So you had to take these doctors, these clinicians, and train them how to interact in a very patient first way. What were some of those key points that you wanted to convey to them as you were onboarding them onto your team? Like, this is how we do it at this ER. These are some of the things you want to keep in mind. Like, what were those key points you were trying to instill in these staff members as they were joining the team?
Yeah, you hit it right on. We had to do a course. We actually required physicians before they touch the patient to go through a course. And so every month we would have a course, and in that course, what we taught, we didn't teach any medicine because state I'm in Texas. The state of Texas board made sure that those doctors knew medicine. We taught them how to have better bedside manners. And we basically went through case studies of patients in the past that may have complained of X and Y and how we could have done things better. Common things being common. Doctors, unfortunately, felt rushed and they wouldn't spend time with the patient. Communication was an issue, so we spent a lot of time telling them, "Hey, we need to communicate with our patients." The example that I gave of group triage, we enforced that to make sure that those were the things. And in the ER, unfortunately, because of the volume, doctors are taught to get patients in and get them right out. And
Yeah.
so we did the reverse. We were telling, no, no, no. We can tell by the time the patient was in the ER if they wanted to be in and out. That's one thing, but this patient felt like it was rushed. So we would look at their times to make sure the opposite, that they were there long enough. You know.
Yeah. And then was there like I'm assuming since y'all are freestanding, like how much work was done on the administrative or the back end to make sure there was a continuity of care? Because these patients are coming into you. but they might be going to their, PCP or, another specialist down the road. Like, were there extra steps that you put in place to make sure that they, on the continuity side, that once they left you, they weren't just kind of dangling in the winds?
No, that's an excellent point. We actually always made sure to follow up with our patients in two ways. One, if it was deemed appropriate where the patient needed to see a specialist right away, we would make the appointment for the patient.
Oh,
And
wonderful.
so while they were in the ER, we would say, okay, Dr. X is going to meet you at this time. If it was in the middle of the night, we would say, hey, the office opens at this time. Let us call and make this appointment, give us some slots and see if we can do it for you. And so we would do that. On top of that, we would, if the patient was really, really sick, but was okay to go home, then we would call them the same day just to see how they're doing. If not, our protocol was that within 48 hours, we would call every single patient.
Yeah. Okay. So you were going above and beyond what they would get basically anywhere else, unless you're going to one of these big hospital systems, and even then, it's like, oh well, that department will call you whenever you get discharged, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's my point. That was the culture that we instilled. And we empowered people in the front desk and the back to do whatever it needed to be done for the patient. A lot of big hospitals, if you want to change, I know when I worked for a big hospital system, if I wanted to change a protocol or something, I literally would have to go to the regional person, or sometimes I had to go to nationals. And I'm like,
Yeah.
forget it. It'll be 3 months from now. By then, it won't matter or something. So that was the beauty. We really empowered everybody, and we just told them just do the right thing. And believe it or not, they did, and it's kind of seemed like a simple thing to tell people, but at the big hospital system, there's a lot of red tape, and they couldn't
Yeah.
do a lot of things. We were giving patients food, coats in the winter. Homeless would come in. We would, give them things, and I remember getting the what is it, the owner of the building like called and saying, "Hey, you need to stop feeding the homeless and you need to stop giving them stuff because they're making it worse for the other tenants around you." And I was like, "Well, we're a healthcare system. I'm a doctor. We're here to
Yeah. We're
help."
helping people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that big point about red tape, especially in big hospitals. So I did a 5-year stint at the Department of Veterans Affairs. And I mean, some of those things, like if you wanted to change one little protocol, sometimes it was literally an act of Congress. So yeah, empowering
Yeah.
people to make those changes is
Mhm.
awesome.
Yeah. I was in the army, so I can relate.
Oh yeah.
I was there.
Yeah, it's rank and file for sure. So we talked the other day, and you said you took these 7 clinics, you rolled them up, and you sold them at the end, and now you're doing what you're doing now. So when you were building this practice, was the intention always to sell, or was this one of those like, oh man, it's kind of just building and growing, and now in order for it to hit the next level, it needs some capitalization, so we're going to sell it, or were you thinking at the beginning, I'm going to build this business, build some value in it, and then exit?
I always describe myself as a chess player. I'm always looking long term. And anything I do from day one, I'm already looking at the last day or trying my best to look at the last day. As much as I knew I didn't want to give up, this was my little baby. In my mind, I knew that the greater good was for it to continue growing. So every time we strategically opened another location or spot or anything in the business, even protocols or standardization of the business, we made sure to do it so that in the day, in the future, if we were gone, it was kind of already all running and well set up.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you ever read that book, Built to Sell? I think John Warlow wrote it.
No, I don't. I love reading, so
Yeah,
got it.
it's a quick read. It's like maybe 150 pages, but he puts it as a fictional story, but it's walking this business owner through wanting to sell his business. And the basic idea is like, well, you build it in a way that it is valuable, right? Like you're putting the pieces in place along the way to make it a sellable asset instead of one of those, especially in service-based industries like healthcare. It's like, oh, if the main doctor leaves, sometimes that practice just implodes, right?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, so true. So
So
I've seen that.
specifically with the selling of that business, how did you go about that? Did you get a broker involved? Did you just have contacts in the space that you knew were looking at? Because I think you sold it to a PE firm, right?
Yeah, I ironically, yes, the answer is yes to everything you
Yes
just
to
said.
all.
But the company that had invested in all the ERs asked if they could basically take over, and we, it's a lot easier since it's already all in house to do that.
Yeah.
So, in a way, I feel like I lucked out because instead of um, looking and doing all that, it takes forever. It's
Yeah.
not just
You weren't
quick.
shopping this business around. It was kind of like a ready-made solution there.
Yeah, and again, I think it was the end in mind.
Yeah.
Um, Now, looking forward, I love this space, so, but now I'm trying to do more in the digital healthcare space, and that's kind of where my time is spent now.
Yeah, yeah. So let's talk about that because you're working now as a consultant with technology and virtual care. Just I guess at the beginning, let's just talk a little bit about the book. What is the book about? I mean, obviously we know what well, you should know at this point what Chat GPT is, but for those who don't know, what is it?
So think of it as if it's even hard for me to think about it because it does so much, but think of it as a computer just answering your questions, but better than Google, but customizing it. So, for example, if God forbid you have, I'm going to make something up, you have diabetes and you need to better control how to take care of your diabetes, a lot of it is diet. And so you could literally type into ChatGPT, I need a low glycemic diet and give me the food and create a grocery list, and then I need a meal plan, and it'll create all these things. My advice to on in the book and now is whatever ChatGPT tells you, especially when it comes to healthcare, run it by your provider. I know that sounds lame. The problem is
The lawyers are
um
happy now you said
yeah,
it.
yeah, exactly. But my whole goal of the book is how can we use this tool and how can we better our health? And so my goal was to, in a way, I kind of rushed the book, and it was hard to write because I'm like, okay, who's my audience? Is it, these techie people that already know everything, or is it these doctors that may not know much, or could be the opposite? They know more than me. And so my goal with all this was let me get the subject out. Let me just talk about it and let the leaders drive the conversation and let the patients as well drive the conversation. Because my goal with the book, it was no financial gain. I don't have a company or anything for this. My goal was literally let's get this conversation going. Let's get these leaders and patients saying, hey, I want X, and then let the leaders create those products for the patients because fast forward in the future patients are going to have better care, and
Yeah.
that's literally why I wrote this book.
Yeah. Yeah, I think especially for the we were talking a couple days ago, like in the ancillary healthcare space where I'm at, physical therapists, occupational therapists, places where and specialties where a lot of their business models essentially are recurring care and recurring visits and all that. There's almost this fear on the part of practitioners like I don't want to even begin thinking about something like using artificial intelligence to begin customizing things for my patients because then what am I going to do, right? And there is a fear in the healthcare community that man the robots are going to take over and there's not going to be a role for clinicians, but as you have pointed out, right, there's always going to be a role for people in healthcare, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, though I as far as I can see, I mean, I always think there's always going to have to be that human to human touch.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of ethics out there talking about will these AI robots or chatbots get to the point where patients don't want to see a doctor? They're too embarrassed. They rather talk to a robot because they know no one really knows what's going on. With that said, I feel like there's always going to be space. I think if anything, we're going to be able to do more for our patients and more fun stuff and educate. I feel like this platform lends itself for prevention medicine and for education. And so, for example, I'll use a diabetes example again. If you don't know much about it, yeah, you can Google it, but to have the ability to type in and say, "Hey, I'm a 50-year-old male and XYZ, what are the best steps to take?" It's just powerful to have that customized. Obviously, you're going to give it to your doctor right afterwards, but still, that power is huge. Unfortunately, doctors don't have time to spend as much as they could with you. And so having this ability, having the way I see the future is I go in, I hear the prompts, and then I bring it to my doctor and they're like, yeah, yeah, check, check, check. Oh, I disagree with this. And then it's more of a conversation, but then all the bones are already in the paper. And I think fast forward in the future, I do see a future where you go to your doctor's website and a bot will go through your personalized care with you and kind of go through everything, and then the doctor will kind of look and verify those data points and say, yep, I agree, take it into action. So I'm excited. I really think we're going to have better healthcare. I really do. It's just a matter of time now.
Yeah. No, I'm a big proponent of technology. I always think that if we think about it as almost a force multiplier, right? Like it's something that's taking our limited capacity because there's only so many hours in a day. There's only so many patients that you can touch in a given time frame. If you have something like this that's like you said, like a chat bot that is going through a patient's individualized story, getting all the information, and then they're able to sit down with the clinician after that's done, and the clinician and the patient are then more having a conversation about, okay, this is what's recommended, maybe in your case we do xyz instead of this, and maybe we swap this out or
Mhm.
change this so it fits into your lifestyle a little better. But the idea of like not adopting this technology, I feel like we would do that to our detriment, not just for the professions as a whole, the healthcare profession as a whole, but then also for the patients that we won't be able to serve, right?
Yeah. In my book, I talk about I see a play here for the ER doctor, 3, 4 in the morning. The guy's been up for, 24 hours ish. And patient comes in just to be able to have that peripheral brain kind of going through and looking at all the data and saying, you know what, here's your differential diagnosis. Here are the things that you should consider. And for the person, if you're not 100%, looking at it and say, "Oh, wait, yeah, maybe I should order that test. I thought about it, but I didn't." But then having the computer say, "Hey,
You might
I
want
would
to,
do it,"
yeah.
and then you're like, "All right, let's do that." And I think it would save lives, and nothing against humans. I mean, we are human. We make
Yeah.
errors, and unfortunately, medicine we're not allowed to make errors. And so, I see us being very more efficient, helping patients more, and I don't know, I'm really stoked, and I'm kind of glad that I'm at the age that I am, so that when I am retired and needing more healthcare, that these things will be there.
It'll be ironed out by the time you need it, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping.
um, so somebody that's interested in the book itself, like what's kind of the main driving point behind the book that you'd want readers to walk away with?
Yeah, my main goal is to start the conversation, kind of go through it, jump around different chapters, have some fun hacks in the back. Just honestly, just look at it and just educate yourself because the more you educate yourself, the more you're like, huh, I could use this technology, or I'm going to talk to my doctor, or maybe you're a hospital administrator and you're like, huh, I think we could use XYZ. Obviously, there's barriers. And that takes it to the next step. I created a little LinkedIn group called ChatGPT and Healthcare in LinkedIn. And my goal is simple, just bring people into the forum and have people talk about these things. So that way, the computer programmers are there, lawyers are there, doctors are there, patients are there, but then everybody's talking to move the needle forward.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we're getting near the bottom here. I always ask, like, if there's one or two main points, and you might have already covered it here. It sounds like if there's one or two main points you'd want a listener of this show to walk away with, thinking specifically about one, building a business that's patient centric or a healthcare practice that's patient centric, and then leveraging technology in it. What would that big overarching idea be for them?
You know, one humbling thing is, depending on your personality type, we all want to do it all. We all have that type A, but it's important to realize you can't do it all. So my last advice is make sure you have a mentor. Make sure, kind of like marriage, make sure you find someone that's going to complement you in the business, and ideally find that one person that is the opposite of you that can complement your idea. That way, when you go into business, you know that you got your box and this other person has the other, and together you have the mission.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Castro, thanks so much for being on the show. Where can people find out about you, the book, all of your work, all the places?
Yeah, I am on all the major social media. Just go in and type in / Harvey Castro MD, and that's on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And then as far as the book, same thing. You can just type in Harvey Castro MD in Amazon, and any book that I write will show up. I have several books on there. I have one about how to be successful in life, and the last one is this one we just talked about.
Awesome. Cool deal. Well, thanks so much, Doc. Have a good weekend.
Have a good one. Thank you for your time, and thanks for
Yeah.
joining us all.